There is a tree growing across the American Southwest that produces a sweet, high-protein flower, needs no irrigation, fixes nitrogen into the soil, and keeps producing for decades. Indigenous peoples lived on it for thousands of years. And for most of the last century, the United States spent enormous sums of money trying to kill every one of them. I need to tell you about this tree, because the more I learned about it, the angrier I got. The tree is mesquite, genus Prosopis. It's a legume. 5 species are native to the American Southwest. Honey mesquite, Prosopis glandulosa, is the most widespread. Its range stretches from the Pacific coast to the Gulf of Mexico. Velvet mesquite covers southern Arizona and New Mexico. Screwbean mesquite lines the watercourses of the lower Colorado and Rio Grande. These trees have been growing in the Sonoran, Chihuahuan, and Mojave deserts for thousands of years, long before any government drew a line on a map and declared them a problem. But let me start with why this tree should matter to you, even if you've never seen one. Mesquite flour ground from the ripe seed pods, not the wood, contains approximately 13% protein, 25% dietary fiber, and significant quantities of calcium, magnesium, potassium, iron, and zinc. A USDA Agricultural Research Service publication documented the main mesquite flour composition as roughly 45% sucrose, 25% dietary fiber, 8% protein, and 2% fat, with 650 milligrams per 100 grams of total antioxidants. The protein content climbs dramatically if you mill the hard inner seeds, along with the pod whole. Pod flour from honey mesquite contains about 10.6% protein, and the seed fraction alone hits 40.5% protein, according to a 1984 doctoral dissertation by Reza Zolfagari at Texas Tech University. That protein number matters. Wheat flour, the backbone of the Western diet, contains about 10 to 13% protein. Rice flour, 6 to 7%. Mesquite pod flour matches or beats wheat, and it does it without gluten. It's naturally For the growing population of people with celiac disease or gluten sensitivity, that's not a minor detail. But here's the number that really stopped me. Mesquite flour has a glycemic index of 25. 25 whole wheat flour has a glycemic index of around 75. White sugar is 65. White bread is 75. Mesquite flour is lower than virtually every common grain and sweetener on the planet. It tastes sweet. People describe it as caramel, cinnamon, chocolate, molasses, but it barely moves your blood sugar. And this matters in a very specific, very painful way. The Tohono O'odham Nation, the indigenous people of the Sonoran Desert who ate mesquite as a dietary staple for thousands of years, now has one of the highest diabetes rates in the world. VOA News and the USDA's Food and Nutrition Assistance Research database both report that 50 to 70% of Tohono O'odham adults have type 2 diabetes. Cultural Survival documented that roughly 70% of the tribe's 27,000 members have adult-onset diabetes, the highest rate on the planet. What changed? Their diet changed. When the traditional food system, mesquite pods, tepary beans, sholia buds, saguaro fruit, was replaced with commodity foods from the U.S. government, white flour, white sugar, canned goods, processed food, the diabetes rate exploded. A low-glycemic, high-fiber, high-protein diet built over millennia was swapped for a high-glycemic, high-sugar, low-fiber diet in a single generation. The mesquite tree didn't fail them. We took the mesquite tree away from them. Let me tell you what this tree can do, because the engineering is extraordinary. Mesquite roots can reach depths of 150 to 200 feet. That's not a typo. KNPR in Nevada documented Mojave mesquite roots extending up to 200 feet underground. The iForest Journal, a peer-reviewed forestry publication, recorded Prosopis juliflora roots penetrating 53 meters, about 174 feet. These are the deepest root systems of any North American tree. They don't need irrigation because they build their own water pipeline straight to the water table. In the Mojave Desert, in the Sonoran Desert, in West Texas, places where summer temperatures hit 113, 115, 120 degrees, mesquite stays green when everything else is dead. And it doesn't just take water, it gives something back. Mesquite is a nitrogen-fixing legume. Its roots form a symbiotic relationship with rhizobium bacteria that convert atmospheric nitrogen into plant-available nitrogen in the soil. The iForest review documented that mesquite and acacia species fix approximately 30 to 40 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare per year. That's free fertilizer, no synthetic input, no chemical runoff, no cost. The tree literally feeds the soil around it while it feeds you. And the leaf litter and fallen pods that accumulate beneath the canopy, they decompose into organic matter that improves the soil's water-holding capacity and nutrient-binding ability, especially in sandy soils. In overgrazed, nutrient-depleted rangeland, mesquite creates what ecologists call fertility islands, pockets of enriched soil where other plants can reestablish. One mesquite tree produces approximately 23 pounds of pods per year. According to field data cited by foraging researchers, at scale, 1 acre of mesquite can yield roughly 3,000 pounds of pods annually, according to multiple foraging sources. A single tree can live hundreds of years, the national park. Service states that mesquite trees can live for centuries, and it begins producing pods within a few years of establishment. This isn't a crop you plant and harvest once. This is a food system that produces continuously for generations, with no irrigation, no fertilizer, no pesticide, no tillage, and no annual replanting. Compare that to sugar. Sugar requires massive irrigation. Sugarcane uses approximately 1,500 to 2,000 liters of water per kilogram of sugar produced. It requires heavy fertilizer application. It depletes soil. It requires annual planting, harvesting, and processing in industrial refineries. The global sugar market is a $90+ billion industry, and the product it delivers has a glycemic index of 65 and is directly linked to obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and metabolic syndrome. Mesquite delivers sweetness, protein, fiber, and minerals from a tree that grows in sand, drinks from 200 feet underground, fertilizes its own soil, and never needs replanting. And we spent the last century trying to destroy it. Here's what happened. When cattle ranching expanded across the American Southwest in the 1800s, ranchers used mesquite pods as supplemental feed for livestock on long cattle drives. The pods passed through the cattle's digestive system. The hard seeds were scorified by stomach acid, and they were deposited in manure, a perfect growing medium. As cattle overgrazed the native grasslands, removing mesquite's only real competitor, the mesquite seedlings thrived. The tree spread rapidly across Texas rangeland. By the mid-1900s, Texas ranchers viewed mesquite as an invasive pest. It competed with grass for water. Its thorns injured livestock. Its shade suppressed grass growth beneath the canopy. And so began one of the most expensive, most prolonged, and most futile eradication campaigns in American agricultural history. The Texas State Soil and Water Conservation Board spent nearly $50 million over a 10-year period from fiscal year 2000 to fiscal year 2010, treating approximately 300,000 hectares with herbicides and mechanical removal. The iForest Journal documented this in detail. That's 740,000 acres. The methods included aerial spraying of triclopyr and clopyralid herbicides at costs of $37 to $62 per hectare, deep grubbing with bulldozers and track hose, controlled burns, and even experimental biological control agents, including seed-eating, broochhead beetles imported from Argentina. The result? Mesquite continued to increase its land coverage by approximately 2% annually in certain Texas counties. Based on long-term studies conducted since 1976, 22 million hectares of Texas rangeland, nearly one-third of the state's pasture land, is now covered in mesquite. The tree won. And it wasn't just Texas. In Sudan, mesquite was initially introduced as a miracle tree to combat desertification. When it spread too aggressively, the government reclassified it as a noxious weed and launched a government-sponsored eradication program. Same pattern in Australia, South Africa, Kenya, and parts of India. Introduce it, praise it, lose control of it, declare war on it. But here's what nobody seems to ask. Why are we spending $50 million to kill a tree that produces free food? Let me give you the economics. Mesquite flour retails for approximately $4.50 per quarter pound at small producers like Gallery of Food, and $29.90 for 44 ounces at Casa de Mesquite. Capadona Ranch in Texas sells organic mesquite bean flour with bulk discounts. The Savor the Southwest project documented that it takes about 2 hours of leisurely work to pick, clean, dry, store, and mill 5 gallons of whole pods into 1 gallon, about 5 pounds of mesquite flour. That flower at retail is worth $15 to $75 depending on the market. Desert Harvesters, a nonprofit in Tucson, has organized community mesquite millings and food festivals for nearly 20 years. They bring a hammer mill mounted on a trailer to neighborhoods during the June and July harvest season. People bring bags of dried pods, the mill grinds them, and families walk away with flour, free food, from a tree growing on their block. The Tohono O'odham Community College's Agricultural Extension, under the guidance of tribal elder Clifford Pablo, teaches mesquite harvesting and processing. The O'odham lunar calendar designates an entire month to mesquite, uses Wihugdag Masad, mesquite bean, harvest moon, in early June when the pods ripen. Archaeology, Southwest preservation archaeologist Aaron Wright documented that ethnobotanists Willis Bell and Edward Castetter suggested mesquite was the principal source of wild food for indigenous communities along the lower Colorado and Gila rivers, possibly even more important than maize. In 1871, Frederick Grossman, the Bureau of Indian Affairs agent at Gila River, stated that the Akimel O'odham and Paiposh gathered millions of pounds of mesquite pods annually. Millions of pounds from a tree that nobody planted, nobody irrigated, and nobody fertilized. Now, I have to be honest with you, because there are real challenges. Challenge 1. Mesquite is genuinely invasive when poorly managed. Overgrazed land, disturbed soil, and cattle dispersal create conditions where mesquite overwhelms grassland. A mature mesquite tree in Texas can translocate 167 liters of water per day. The TSSWCB estimated that removing 7 hectares of established mesquite saves more than 1.2 million liters of water per year. Ranchers who depend on grass for cattle have a legitimate complaint. Unchecked mesquite does reduce available grazing. Challenge 2. Processing is labor-intensive. The pods are easy to harvest, but the hard inner seeds require mechanical milling to break down. Traditional stone mortar couldn't crack them. People either left the seeds in the flour, adding fiber but reducing digestibility, or winnowed them out, losing the high protein fraction. Modern hammer mills solve this problem, but they require equipment and energy. Challenge 3. The market barely exists. There's no mesquite commodity exchange, no futures market, no USDA grading standard for mesquite flour. No processing infrastructure at scale. The pods come from wild harvested trees, not managed orchards. Supply is unpredictable. Quality varies tree to tree. Aaron Wright described tasting undertones of honey, citrus, apple, and cacao in different Tucson trees, but also noted that Chilean mesquite hybrids can be astringent and bitter. Challenge for thorns. Native mesquite has serious thorns. Honey mesquite thorns can be 2 inches long. Harvesting means reaching into thorn-covered branches and pulling pods by hand. Thornless varieties exist. Chilean mesquite lacks thorns, which is why it's popular in landscaping, but its pods are often inferior in flavor. Challenge 5. Perception. 80 years of eradication campaigns have embedded mesquite in the American ranching consciousness as a weed, a pest, a problem. Convincing a Texas rancher that the tree he's spent $50 million fighting is actually a food source is a generational communication challenge. The tree's reputation was poisoned before the conversation even started. So here's where we actually are and what's possible. Researchers have been studying mesquite food applications for decades. Peter Felker at Texas A&M University Kingsville conducted extensive research on Prosopis species, documenting food, lumber, gum, and biofuel applications. The mesquite gum, similar to gum arabic, functions as an emulsifier and stabilizer in food production, with higher protein content and better emulsifying properties than traditional gum arabic. Mesquite lumber is remarkably hard. Side hardness of 1,060 kilograms versus 313 for loblolly pine and 481 for southern red oak, with the lowest volumetric shrinkage of any wood tested by the Texas Forest Service. And here's the biofuel angle that surprised me. Wong et al., in a study published and reviewed by Ifarist, found that mesquite had the highest greenhouse gas offset efficiency of any feedstock tested in the southern Great Plains, better than sweet sorghum, better than switchgrass, at the lowest total cost per hectare. The tree that ranchers are spending millions to bulldoze is simultaneously the most efficient carbon-sequestering, lowest-cost biofuel feedstock in the region. But let me bring this back to food, because that's where the real story is. Right now, you can buy mesquite flour from Capadona Ranch in Texas, from Oatman Farms in Arizona, from Casa de Mesquite, from desert harvesters in Tucson. You can substitute it for 1/4 of the flour in any cookie, bread, pancake, or muffin recipe. 8. Adds a sweet, warm caramel chocolate flavor. It drops the glycemic impact of whatever you're baking. It adds protein, fiber, calcium, magnesium, and iron, and every pound of mesquite flour you use represents food that was grown with 0 water input, 0 fertilizer, 0 pesticide, and 0 carbon emissions from tillage. If you live in the Southwest Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, Southern California, there are probably mesquite trees within walking distance of your house right now. The pods ripen in June and July. They're free. You pick them off the tree or off the ground after they fall. You dry them in the sun for a day or two. You run them through a hammer mill or even a heavy-duty blender. You sift out the seed fragments and you have flour. A flour that indigenous peoples relied on as their primary food source for thousands of years. A flour with a glycemic index of 3 times lower than the white flour that replaced it. A flour from a tree that heals the soil it grows in, survives 200-degree heat, and doesn't need a single drop of irrigation. And instead of harvesting it, we spent $50 million trying to bulldoze it into extinction. I keep coming back to the Tohono O'odham, 70% diabetes rate, the highest in the world. They ate mesquite for thousands of years and had no diabetes. We replaced their diet with ours, and now their community is dying from a disease that barely existed in their population before Western contact. The mesquite tree is still there. It's still producing pods. It's still fixing nitrogen. It's still pulling water from 200 feet underground and turning desert sand into food. The only thing that changed is us. We stopped listening to the people who knew how to use it, and we spent a century paying to destroy it. If you want to try mesquite flour, start with a 1/4 cup substituted into your next batch of pancakes or cookies. Taste it before you judge it. And if you live in the Southwest and you've got a mesquite tree in your yard or your neighborhood, go pick the pods this summer. Dry them, mill them, eat them. You'll be eating something that people have eaten in that exact spot for longer than recorded history. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever eaten mesquite? Have you ever even heard of it as a food? And if you live in the Southwest, do you have mesquite trees near you? I'm genuinely curious how many people are sitting next to a food source they've been told is a weed.